Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Inside the Mediation Room with Michael and Karen Aurit. So, we got a treat today, hailing from the United Kingdom. We got Graham Ross in the house. Oh my goodness, Karen, we didn't go to our backyard for this show, did we today? We didn't keep it local. We went across the pond. We are here with ODR Pioneer, online dispute resolution pioneer from the United Kingdom, Graham Ross. He is a UK lawyer. He's an accredited mediator with over 30 years of experience in IT and the law. He is widely known as the leading UK expert in the field of ODR. He's here. He's here right now. How cool is this? Goodness, he co-founded the UK's first ODR service, a blind bidding service called WeCanSettle back in 2000. And he has been an innovator just again and again and again. Amazing ODR technology from Graham Ross. Today, in addition to his ODR training that I believe Mediate's very own Colin Rule has several appearances in, Graham is just on fire. He's speaking every conference that deals with ODR in the world. Graham is there. And we have him here on Inside the Mediation Room. Karen, how do you feel? We have Graham.
Well, after that introduction, I feel terrific. Thank you, Michael.
Yeah.
It is such a, but you're right. I started in 1998 or 9 and met up with Colin at that time in London, where I am now. And it's horrifying to think of how long, but yes, been through developing a couple of systems in very early days before anyone really wanted to even use them, of course, but we did have some quite interesting projects, including one with the court service, small claim court service in the UK, and a number of other pilots and projects. I'm now closely involved with Smart Settle Resolutions of Canada, who have a far more complex and powerful form of what they call visual blind bidding. But any questions on that, I can talk about that another time. But you want to hear about myself and my work and my what I've been doing. I think, do you have any specific questions, or should I talk?
Yes. Oh gosh, we have so many questions. Karen, first of all,
questions galore.
So many questions. Karen, can you tell, is Inside the Mediation Room just suddenly more sophisticated?
Yes.
I mean, you can feel it, right?
I feel it.
Where do we begin? We have so many questions, but I think that Karen, first and foremost, you have a very important question to ask Graham before we really get into it. Karen, where do we begin with Graham?
Graham, you know we need to work a little bit harder to build trust online. So let's start with an icebreaker question.
Icebreaker.
Question for you to dig deep. So far, we've asked everyone, what is your favorite childhood cereal?
My favorite childhood cereal?
Yes.
Good heavens. This has come totally unprepared. Shreddies, I have to say.
Oh,
I don't know whether you have exactly. I've been to the States many, many times, and I can't recall what I had for breakfast.
Shreddies, oh, that sounds lovely. It's like, must be like shredded wheat, like we have that.
Readable.
That
Yes.
might be a good technique for starting out with online mediation, a real off-the-wall question.
Right.
We needed to build that rapport, but really going back to the 90s, serious question for you now. What made you passionate, and why do you believe that you're still passionate today? What exactly drives you to continue this work?
Okay, well, I've always been interested in technology and how it can change things. And as a lawyer, very early days, I used to be concerned how much time I had to spend learning about new court decisions and new laws and what have you. And I felt it might be very useful to have something very brief that lawyers could see, to update them in some of the basic changes, because, you know, of course, common law is continually developing. The whole point about it. And so I started something called LawTell, which was actually run on something called Prestel. This is before the internet, before the World Wide Web, with little green writing on a television screen. And well, we called it Lextel then. I had a partner and eventually got sold on and became LawTell. But that was a very early enthusiasm I had for how technology could add some value to being a lawyer, to making it more easier to keep up to date with things. And since then, I've constantly been involved in technology. I love the way it can change the way the processes take place. So a big concern I have with online dispute resolution in the way that it suddenly exploded during the pandemic was people had a very narrow view of it. And that was very frustrating to me. They thought ODR is Zoom, basically, or any other video conferencing facilities, of course, that are available. And we're already seeing many mediators saying, oh, isn't it great to get back to seeing people in person? Well, of course, it's great to see people in person. If you are a mediator, you're a person-to-person person if you have any sort of skills in that. But all that is doing, all that video conferencing is doing, is replicating the exact same processes that we follow as mediators and simply bridging the problem of not being able to get to sit in the same room with people. But it's not changing things. And I passionately believe that technology is not there just to make things easier, or it's to actually extend the skills of mediation, extend what we as mediators do, and enabling us to do things in different ways. And that's really where the exciting things is, where AI can help. I always, by the way, refer to AI. My AI is not artificial intelligence where I press a few buttons and a machine comes out with some judgments or answers or views. Augmented intelligence is the right acronym for me. I think people who refer to augmented now use the reverse acronym IA, which is a little bit confusing. But anyway, augmented in the sense that it needs a skilled mediator to take advantage of the technology, and it augments the skill. And I can refer to some things about that what's available. But that's the answer to your question. Is I'm just it's always an enthusiasm for not just technology, not just pressing buttons, not just machines, but what they can do to improve the process.
No, it's so interesting to hear you say that. You're so aligned with where Karen and I are on this. You're saying, look, technology is not here. ODR is not here to make the process easier. She agrees. That little girl agrees. I don't know what her name is, but she is so excited about what I'm about to say. She had to chime in, Graham. So technology, not to make things easier, not to kind of just be a patchwork to solve a problem. What you're saying is technology is here, ODR is here to make it better. But actually, do you believe, Graham, as a follow-up, that actually the ODR process can make mediation better?
Yes, very much so. I mean, easier in the sense that the access to it is easier if you can access it online. And by the way, I always feel that there isn't this, binary issue of you either do it online or you're not. I mean, there's great benefit in combining. You can still have traditional mediation and use some of the AI augmented intelligence tools available to augment your skills. So it's about actually increasing the prospects of obviously reaching agreement. So therefore, if you can have, for example, as is available, a way in which proposals can be put forward that are anonymized, where the machine can automate brainstorming, all of this removes the emotion out of negotiation. As we all know, too often people stick on positions feeling that they need to show a strength and not conceding, and that's the areas of difficulty in, and of course the skill of a mediator is to overcome that and to encourage people to be more pragmatic and to see things properly. But technology can make that much easier. Yes, indeed, I do believe it improves the whole process by increasing the prospects of settlement.
Wow. Wow. I want to kind of continue on here with you, Graham. One of the things that Karen and I heard most, and that we still hear today, but we heard most when obviously the world came to an end in March of 2020, and everyone went online, and people said, gosh, it's just so much more difficult to build trust with clients, to build rapport, to gain their confidence online through particularly Zoom, through video conferencing. And we have our thoughts on that, but I want to get your thoughts on that, Graham.
Well, first of all, I agree with what you say.
Yeah.
Sorry, do you want to add to the question?
Yeah, and very specifically, Graham, what I would ask is practical things that mediators can do, practical things that we can do to build rapport online. Yes.
Well, first of all, I do agree with what you're saying. It obviously does make it more difficult when you're not together with the people you're talking about. Mediation is a very person-to-person skill, and you develop your trust because you are a person who naturally is skilled at developing that trust. But there are techniques to overcome that division. Of course, they vary according to whether you're doing a synchronous web video conferencing like Zoom, or whether you're doing an asynchronous, or whether you're using technology tools. If we talk about, let's say, asynchronous, I like to look at the three areas: synchronized, synchronous mediation using web video conferencing, asynchronous, where each party present something that they're going to say in their own time, usually in text, and then of course the whole area of AI tools that help the parties, as we've discussed just before, to reach a resolution. If we're talking about asynchronous, the first thing is, and in a sense this is part of standard mediation technique, but it can become over much more stronger. So whenever anybody is saying something, it's very important, if you are in a synchronous text platform, to repeat back what you think has been said, to make sure that person understands and trusts that you have understand him correctly. It's a standard skill for a mediator to do this reflection and repetition. But I think it's much easier to do it when you are doing it by text. You can make sure that they fully understand. When it comes to video, there's this whole business about, I'm not quite sure I'm doing what I'm about to advise, but I always say, and it's not so easy sometimes, that you should be looking at the camera rather than looking at the image of the other person you're speaking to, because in that way you're not actually seen to be looking at them. As we know, looking people in the eye is often important to try to get the message and to build trust.
Excellent. So you're saying, actually, great tip, via email and text, mediators can potentially do more to reflect and reframe what has been said, reflect that back in text to acknowledge that you understand and that you have read and heard what has been said. We should not assume that just because they've sent it to us, we can just boom reply. Let's do a little bit more strategic communication in that way.
Yeah, and particularly when it comes to the sharing of information, permission for the sharing of information with the other party. So as we know, we have confidential discussions with separate parties, and we agree not to say anything to the other party without permission in order to help the party be more free and open and talk and answer questions as honestly as they can, and giving you the full picture. And so again, asynchronous text allows you to make it clear, and I have it in my agreements that I won't say anything to the other party that you say, that one party, without specific agreement. And you can put that down in writing so they have that confidence that you have agreed that, and they therefore can trust you.
You know, I heard you speak. There was a video of you speaking on this issue, and there were a few things that you said that I found really particularly interesting. I wonder if you might touch on them. One, you said, build confidence in people by bringing yourself, more of yourself, you know, to
Yes.
the process, because they're not smelling you, they're not seeing you, they're not feeling your energy right there in the room across from the table. So find ways to bring yourself. That was one piece. You also mentioned be ready to answer their questions, their most common questions. And then finally, you made the point about there are three environments when you're on Zoom, right? You have your environment, and you have each of their environments if they're in different places. How do you, set boundaries? Setting boundaries is going to lead to trust building because you have no control over their environments. So I wonder if on those 3 points you might expound just a bit on bringing yourself, on being ready to answer questions, and setting boundaries to build trust.
Right. And I think what you're referring to there is I feel that when you're in the presence of someone, you can, if you have that skill, develop that trust and a belief in who you are. In one sense, it's not necessary. You may say, I'm just a mediator. I'm just going through various processes. I'm just trying to help people reach an agreement. But I think we all do actually a little bit more without thinking about it if we're successful as mediators than just saying that. And I think when you're doing it online, one might need to work a little bit harder at trying to emulate that, if you like, task by perhaps letting people know a little bit more about who you are, what your life is, what you do. I mean, obviously, you're not there to, they're not really interested in who you are, but some little bit of references to things you like or important to you, sport you carry out, you engage in, or interests that you have, I think suddenly can, particularly if it's shared with the party, maybe because you know that, can help people to relate to and this add that little bit. You see, we start with the recognition that building that natural trust as a mediator is going to be difficult and different when you're online, but there are these things that I think can overcome it. And I think in time, it's like everything in life, that so much we do now is online, that it's becoming more and more natural to identify who you can trust and who you can't trust. We're all very careful not to trust people who write to us who we don't know and saying somebody wants to give us a lot of money. Of course, we know that basic, we don't trust anything in one sense. But because we're not trusting, we hear about these terrible stories online of scams and what have you. When somebody does appear in a natural way, we're only too happy to trust them. We're ready to do that. And I think that, I don't think we can do enough in thinking that, but again, it is a natural. I'll also say something about in video background. Obviously, it's a common thing that I don't think we have them here, but people sit in front of bookcases. We don't seem to have any here, and the thing about a bookcase is that people can sit there, they seem to be listening to what you're saying, but actually they're trying to read your books or or pictures. I was doing one once before I realized I actually had a picture behind me of an elephant, and the elephant in the room. It's a bit corny, but I didn't intend that. I think we have to think about, I mean, here I've done a bit of a promo for my training course behind me, and forgive me if my hair is floating around as they do, because I haven't got a green screen. That's the thing, if you're going to have a virtual background, have a green cloth, a green screen. That'll stop your hair moving around, or other strange things. But thinking about the background, and I think keeping it as plain and simple as possible, so there's nothing to distract attention. But there are lots more things, and I think you gain that by your own experience. I've got a whole list in my course, and there are a lot of things to think about, particularly with Zoom, but particularly with one of my things that I came across was assessing hesitancy. You know, you ask a question, what is a closed question to one of the parties, and really it's a yes or no answer. Do you agree with this? Yes or no? If you're in person with them and they don't just say yes or no, there's a bit of hesitancy. They go, okay, yes. Then that's not quite the same as yes. So we have to think about how we assess. And a simple way, of course, is to just ask people to evaluate the yes or no on a scale of 1 to 10. So we have to think about other situations like that, where let's be honest, there are situations with the asynchronous. That's an asynchronous problem, because if you're on Zoom, you'll see and hear the hesitancy. I think we all do develop these skills through our own work, and I'm interested. Although I've got a course where I've had all these things, I'm very interested to hear people's experiences and whether they came across an idea that they've carried on using because it's been really helpful that maybe they hadn't thought about before.
Yes.
This has been very helpful, Graham. You're bringing up quite a few very helpful tips for our viewers who are wanting to mediate online and meet clients where they're at. So you're bringing up the idea of a background, having a background that's clear of clutter so that you can focus on the task at hand. You brought up communicating, maybe trying to make some eye contact as much as possible. Might be a little bit uncomfortable, but not looking to the side, not looking to a monitor, really being present.
Absolutely.
And also
not, for example, you see it sometimes on TV news when they're the news interviews people. They don't come in the studios these days. They're in their house. That business where you have your laptop on your knee, and actually it's looking at your nose, really, isn't it? The picture's not a very pleasant one often. So I don't know if I'm doing it properly here, but I think you've got to sit upright and have it on and check it beforehand. And also, of course, just knowing the technology. You want the parties to be confident that you know how to properly use the technology. It is only a communication technology. But if things start going wrong and you say, oh, what do I press here? Oh, I can't hear you. I can't hear you. You're wrong. How do you do this? That's all going to lose. That's going to drain away some of their confidence. So, prepare, make sure you understand the technology. And in Zoom, make sure you understand, as you have here, the importance of waiting rooms and setting it so you prevent people who you throw out in case you have a Zoom bomber. They do come along. People uninvited get into other people's Zooms. How awful that is in a mediation. There are ways to reduce that risk. Make sure you know them.
I don't even know who invited Jim Alamed here today, but he seems to have bombed us.
Was that? Somebody, yeah.
Who invited Jim? We love you, Jim. And I mean, I think you're really speaking to that issue of being ready to answer their questions, being ready to assist them. They have different level of tech experiences, and where you can anticipate their issues and be ready with an answer or question, question about the level of security you're maintaining, where you can develop your own set of FAQs and be ready to answer those questions. I think that's right on, and some really good practical advice for our listeners.
Graham, do you have any questions that you ask in your questionnaire prior about their level of knowledge of technology?
Oh, yes. Oh, absolutely. It's not just me showing it, but it's not meant to criticize people. I want to know, look, do you need any help? And should we have I'm certainly practice runs. Although I have to say, I don't use video that much. I'm more an asynchronous man when it comes to mediation. That's probably because I tend to deal with complex. I specialize for my mediation in shareholder, you might call them stockholder disputes between the people who own a company, and they're not one issue, and often it's not about right or wrong. It's about working a solution, because nobody, if people running a business decide to fall out with each other, everybody loses if they don't work out what's going to happen. So having asynchronous platforms, of which there are a number, suits the work that I do, that particular. But obviously in other cases, it's more important to have a quick and immediate and single session mediation as well. But yes, my questions are in that respect. My questions also, of course, about asking them before I tell them what they think mediation is, because of course, as we know, we could often talk to people who are not lawyers, not mediators, and what do they know what mediation is? And most people say, oh yes, it is. Is that something you go through when you get divorced or something? Or they all have different experiences or knowledge. There are so many different types and variations, and I think it's important to see what people's knowledge on, make sure they've got the right understanding of what it is, and of course, most importantly, the obvious points that I'm not here to decide things. I'm not here to make a decision. I'm here to help. It's you, the parties. You're the ones that are going to reach a resolution, if there is going to be one. And making that absolutely crystal clear. It's very easy to think, well, yes, we have an email or a contract which has terms and which explains about the confidentialities and that no legal advice is being given and all these sort of things. I think, but it is important to underline that and make sure and feedback from them that they understand, and that really it's down to them to reach agreement, and you're facilitating that.
So before we move on, just one last follow-up on this issue of trust. We've been talking now for some time about how you build trust, build their confidence when you're mediating with them online. And this last follow-up before, I know, Karen, you've got a burning question for Graham coming up. I want to focus on something that you've talked about before, and that is the importance of setting boundaries. And the issue of confidentiality, and the understanding, or at least the assumption, that when we're in mediation, and I think that our divorce and family mediators can really relate to this, that husband and wife or mom and dad are in their own spaces, and there's this assumption that there's privacy, and setting the boundary is so important. Have you ever been in a situation, Graham, where that trust was breached right there in real time in the mediation? And let's say you realize that there is a third party in the room with one of them. Maybe the other doesn't even realize it. How do you handle that? How do you handle that? Is that something that you are very open about in that moment as an online mediator, and you're just drawing attention to it, letting the other party know? Are you going to caucus at that moment? Because that's a moment where the mediation can be made or broken, right? What do you do in that scenario as an online mediator?
Well, it's a very good point, and in many ways, it's a point that we can't fully control. You can't control who's not just who's in the room that you haven't been seen. I mean, you do the old thing that please turn your camera around 360 degrees, but there may be a door at the back and somebody comes in. It may be accidental, somebody comes in. I think the first thing I like to suggest is that, again, this is really a problem in video conferencing, obviously. I like to request that people use earphones, for example, so that if someone might be inadvertently come into the room, that they're not going to hear what I might be saying, because it's coming through the earphone rather than the loudspeaker on the that's, you know, a minor tip like that. And there's other things you can. I think it's clearly, first of all, putting it in your terms of business and making, I think, yes, those terms of business, don't just ask them to sign it, just go through them and make sure they understand them and will respect them. And we have this whole problem, and you're recording, which I'm happy, we're all happy with this session. There are ways of recording sessions without it being obvious. I mean, here we can see the red circle at the top left, and it is saying it's recording. But there are ways of screenshot recordings which won't be seen by the other parties. There is a limit to how much we can maintain that, and I think it is about seeing how everybody feels about this. Some people are quite. Sometimes it's beneficial for them to have particularly if it's a private session, to be able to look at it again afterwards, and maybe one can agree with that under some sort of control. It's all about. I mean, the confidentiality is all about third parties finding out things that the party you're speaking to does not wish them to know in joint sessions or indeed. So how do we deal with it? Again, it's well, those little businesses about turning the camera around and earphones on and making sure, you know, are there any animals in the house or any little children that might walk in and other people come in and rescue them, all sorts of things. We've got to be pragmatic about this, and we have to accept that there are compromises. We can't be too strict. I think one of the things I do recommend is when you're having a private caucus with one of the parties, now usually in face-to-face, you've got another room where they will go to, and you say, I'm just going to have a word with this person, and then if you like to go in there, there's a cup of coffee you can have, read a paper, whatever, and then I'll call you back. And of course, you feel that the person who's sitting outside, after a while, he may start to think, this is being a bit of a long time with this other guy who I don't like, and I think I want... and your mind starts to play tricks a little bit. So what I do online is I don't do that. I don't put people on hold and say, I'm going to speak to that. And so they've got to still be online. I like to say, please call, we'll finish this session now, and I will call you back in at, say, in an hour's time, or give yourself plenty of time so they can get on with their lives and go and do what they want to do, and they're not waiting on. They know that they will come back in 1 hour. I think that will help the probably false distrust that can happen when people are stuck in another room wondering why on earth he's taking so much time and what he's asking the other person about. Particularly when he comes in, the session is much shorter. But a lot of this is common sense, I think, that you develop with experience.
Thank you for that, Graham.
Graham, I wanted to ask you, and you mentioned before, you said you primarily focus on asynchronous mediation, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, and with asynchronous mediation, do you ever find that the mediation stalls, that you reach impasse because it's not all together at the same time?
Yeah. Well, first of all, what am I talking about, basically? There's, first of all, obviously, conversations that take place like email. I mean, some people can do it by email, of course, and there's all sorts of things you have to watch out for there. Forwarding emails without looking into the tail to see there's something you're forwarding that you don't want the person to to look, and predictive text sending it to the wrong person, all that sort of business. But I'm also talking about the third area, various AI exciting developing tools that will take place asynchronously. So although I declare an interest with SmartSettle, there's systems like Asset Divider for using game theory to help in family disputes to settle the division of family property, for example, which removes emotion. And the SmartSettle products, one referred to as blind bidding, they like to refer to it more particularly as visual blind bidding. Offers are put in, secret offers as well as open offers, and they are put in asynchronously, although you could have a session. I did have one that people settled within an hour on a small claims court case, and they just sat down and dealt with it. So that one is particularly easier. With SmartSettle Infinity, you're putting packages of complex settlements in your own time, but it needs a skill of a mediator to inform the system what the level of interest of each party is in different elements. In a simple example, let's take an employment case where they're trying to settle an unfair dismissal, and let's say the employee had agreed in his contract of employment that if he left the company, he would not work in the same industry for, say, 2 years, a bar out, not very common. But if the mediator, with his skill in talking privately to the employer, finds out that the employer is not really bothered about a bar out clause, they're such a big company, this person can't really harm them, they'd rather get away with less compensation. But of course, less compensation may be worth more to the employee if he is not barred out, because he can get another job in the same industry straight away. So the mediator is working out and finding out and feeding into the system all these levels of interest. The system then can propose in its own time settlements that it feels from its calculations are more likely to be acceptable than others. And also the parties can put forward packages that the other side does not know if it was put by the party or by the mediator or by the machine. So there's lots of different things, but you can't do that without an asynchronous people going on it and responding. It's your turn, now it's your turn. It's a game of tennis.
I think I'm understanding this now much better than I did a few moments ago. And so really, Karen, you're asking what is going to, in an asynchronous environment, keep, and particularly with AI, keep things from stalling. And what I'm hearing Graham say is that there is going to be technology that will actually make proposals to keep things moving. The parties don't know if it's from the other side or it's from the mediator. And so that actually sounds quite exciting, that there are proposals being made that are going to keep us moving forward.
And these systems have nudges. They nudge and prompt the party. So particularly say with the blind bidding one, with SmartSettle 1, you put an offer in and it says there isn't a settlement, but you feel, well, because the other side doesn't know, and you could go to your bottom line. I mean, we all know people don't do that in open negotiation. What are you prepared to offer? You know, $20,000. You may be prepared really to go to 30,000, but you're not going to say that because you're giving away some of your position. But if they don't know what you have offered, then it's not you're more tempted to, well, I'll just go a little bit further what my bottom line is, and you can find very quickly. I mean, the SmartSettle are doing a project with First Nations in Canada, a tribal council for Indigenous peoples, and they were very, very quick to want to use these things. And there's been a report study showing they're getting 100% success with it. Anything that nudges people, that removes the typical negotiating dance, as it were.
I almost want to get into a dispute with someone. Maybe I can get into a dispute with Colin.
Well, listen, we can set you up with a dummy case.
I want to get a dispute.
You want to
Just so
get,
it's like
I'll
a
have a
game
dispute
show,
with you.
right? It's like, Colin, we can fight about something just so that we can play the game show of let's settle this. It sounds fun, doesn't it? Don't you all just want to get into an argument with someone and have
Well, the problem is I'm a lover, not a fighter, Michael. So I don't know. You'll have to find somebody else.
I know that all too well. I know that all too well. Hey, let's shift. Let's really take a 180 shift right now with limited time. We want to know, and I think that everyone here listening would like to understand the most important things that mediators who are interested in really developing and sustaining an online mediation practice, what can we do to market ourselves as online mediators? How do we market our skills? If you could come up with just some very brief tips on how we should be putting ourselves out there if our goal really is to have an online mediation practice.
Well, I think look, I mentioned it before that everyone's heard of mediation. Everyone says they know what mediation is, but very few people really understand it, and they make all sorts of mistakes and see things. So the first thing is generically for all of us, we need to be more promotion and more discussion about what is involved. I mean, it's a sad point to me that we see nothing on TV and media, particularly arbitrate. Well, it's not really arbitration, but we've got Judge Judy, haven't we? One of the most successful programs. I'd like to see a mediator mega program. I think that a version of real case disputes and getting them mediated would be far more interesting than just arbitrary making decisions. There is it ICE-T? There is a mediation program. Is it ICE-T? Colin, I mentioned it in Dublin, didn't I? And it's a terrible program. So we've now got problems of the message not being absolutely right. Look, it's a question of going to organizations, giving talks, business networks, and coming up with role plays. I mean, so that people can understand what is actually happening and can see how outcomes can be much more beneficial than just battling through the courts. We've got a problem in the UK. I don't know how it is in your country, but Lord Chief Justice said a year ago, the vast majority of people in the UK simply cannot afford to go to court and get their disputes resolved. That is a well-recognized problem. And so there is a need for some alternative solutions. There's no easy answer to marketing. I'm not a marketing person. People work hard and develop particular skills in it. I think it's a challenge because it is such a different process, if you like, and but I think it's talking to as many people and going and giving a little talks to your local chamber of commerce or whatever, and making sure. I hang out on a business network. I get a lot of referrals through that. There's lots of that sort of thing available. It's showing people, but actually showing them how it works in some sort of role play case, for example, like you were mentioning.
Mm-hmm. And your ODR course, and we see behind you the ODR training. I know that your ODR course goes into depth, has a module specifically on how to market your.
There is an element, yes.
Yes, and so if you're interested in learning more about that, ODR training with Graham Ross and friends, Colin Rule included, will certainly go in depth on that piece.
Well, Colin's one of a number of people who've done workshops, videos that are on the course. But I want to say about the course, it's not a traditional course where people go into it, they come out of it, and they get a certificate. They do get a certificate. But once you're on it for life. So there's a library section, and whenever there's an important report or some news, we had an ODR law a few years back in Europe, problems with it, whatever. But it's because ODR is continually growing and developing and is far from being matured, that it becomes a growing library that people will then access, and the more and people are very welcome to contribute some papers and what have you.
And are there different levels? Tell us about the training. Are there different levels? You have the pre-recorded training, and then it looks like you have pieces of the training that are interactive. And then is there also the option to do a one-on-one?
Oh, yeah. So the main one is both reading plus watching videos, presentations, and quizzes, of course, a bit of interactive testing. And then the second tier is all that plus a one-on-one marketing advice. So I would sit down and talk to people and then talk about what work they're doing. And we just try to brainstorm it together about some steps that they can take, and they can come back to me for the guidance. And then the third level involves hands-on experience of all the systems that are available. Now that's actually, we're extending that a little bit. We're very happy to give hands-on experience with the, certainly with the Smart Settle ones outside of the course itself, because I think that's important if people want particular. So I'm happy to allow all the various platforms, and we've got CREC, we've got RDO, we've got ODR Plat, we've got ODR for All is coming. I think we're going to hear about that next week, I think, in an ICODA member meeting. There's lots of them being developed, and I think it's important for people to have hands-on experience of all of these systems.
Sounds like you really have different levels that you provide, and thank you for providing that service for everyone. What, Graham, would be the best advice for new mediators who are coming into this field, and we'll have new mediators watching and looking back? What advice? They're just starting their career and they want to begin online. What would you say to them?
Well, of course, the point about my course, it's not a course in mediation. It's a course for already trained mediators, how to adapt their skills and to understand the online environment. So my advice to new mediators is you have the opportunity to jump ahead of the traditional mediator. We still find far too many traditional mediators, as I mentioned at the beginning of this talk, who find it hard to let go of traditions and always say, oh, you can't possibly mediate online, blah, 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 and all this. And the ones who are so glad to get back to face when things eased with the pandemic. That's a great opportunity for the new mediator to completely rewrite how they go about the media. I'm sure, look, mediation has always developed. I think there has been a bit of a rut in both our countries and elsewhere, I think, of making mediation, if you like, as close as possible to litigation, to having lawyers always involved and having representatives. And you can, if you like it, too many people are gatekeepers for existing tradition and litigation tradition, and they're looking for mediation to find its place, similar pricing in there. I think they're the ones who are going to miss out ultimately. I mean, for complex, high-value cases, that'll always be the case, and the argument for more traditional mediation. But actually, it's a fallacy to think that a lot of these technologies and the AI are only available for high volume, low value. You know, we hear that so often about people who talk about ODR, particularly the courts when they introduce it. This assumption that it's only there for low value, high quantity of cases, such as low value consumer. But of course, if you've got a dispute with high value, you've got more money to save, more value by getting that settled. And I think that's one of the tips, is to not just fall into that assumption that it's only for low value cases, where you're not going to be competing with the more experienced mediators. And compete with the more experienced mediators on more one, showing the different ways you can do it. It's down to everybody to market their own skills, but I think if they're very competent Not that many mediators yet are still fully embracing ODR. So there's a lot of work that can be done, a lot of land that can be fenced off by the young mediators as their own.
This sounds very inspiring. You're saying this is optimistic. The future is bright for mediators, and to look at this as an opportunity, as an advantage to move forward, to get with the times. And I think we obviously see this on mediate.com, and after interviewing you, feel even more inspired to just face the fear, whatever fears we have about technology, and this is the new way. Thank you, Graham.
It's the new way. Before we go, Graham, we end, of course, each of our Inside the Mediation Room programs with a questionnaire. We realize that we have such an opportunity, legendary mediators. We've had Don Sapoznik, Bill Eddy, Susan Guthrie, and Woody Mostyn answer these questions. And we're going to ask these questions to you too now, Graham. They were made famous by James Lipton on Inside the Actors Studio, the great television program that were originally asked, actually, by Bernard Prévost from his famous French talk show from the 1970s. And now we're going to ask you, Graham, these following 10 questions. Question number 1. What is your favorite word?
It has to be, as a lawyer, however. I like telling people what I think. There's no simple answers to questions of law. It's this, however, it could be that.
Oh, that's a good one. I like that. Graham, what is your least favorite word?
Well, I've got to be boring and say hate. Did you hear that?
Hate.
I've got a dog in the background. Sorry about that.
No one hates that puppy. It's a good puppy. The puppy just doesn't know that we're asking these important questions. Graham, what turns you on?
I'm going to be careful here. Be polite and say the first light of dawn.
Beautiful.
And of course, what turns you off?
Well, obviously, the last light of dusk.
One.
What?
And not for everyone.
What sound or noise do you love?
Oh, that has to be the spontaneous cheer of 40,000 people when a goal is scored in football.
Ah.
And you jump up, as happened, well, I took Colin. I don't know if Colin's still online. I took him to a game a few years ago. Yes, and particularly this important goal. It's quite amazing when such a large body of people suddenly explode, isn't it? It's amazing noise. It overcomes you almost.
And Graham, what sound or noise do you hate?
You've just heard it. As my friend's dog, we're just looking after for a couple of days, the barking dogs. I love dogs, but I wish they'd just meow or something.
Meow. What is your favorite curse word?
Well, I'm not sure how much freedom I've got to answer this, but the best I could do is asterisk, question mark, ampersand, and asterisk. Work it out yourself.
Yeah.
That one's a little longer than usual, but it does the trick. Graham, what profession, other than your own, would you like to attempt?
Well, I've done it. It's acting, which is a lot of fun. I used to run a little small theatre company. I love theatre anyway.
Oh, wow.
I think people are very blessed if they have a career in that. How blessed, what a lovely thing to do.
And of course, then we must ask you, Graham, what profession would you not like to do?
I've put here, hangman. Can't believe people are still doing that as they are. How's that?
Yes.
What an awful job.
And finally, Karen?
Finally, Graham, if heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
What took you so long?
Graham Ross.
It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on another edition of Inside the Mediation Room. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you very much. I have enjoyed it very much. A lovely experience. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Graham. Thank you so much for joining us. Come back next month. We'll have another great guest. Graham.
Okay, thank you, everybody.